Hey guys, tonight we're doing something a little different. You've probably heard about Pompeii, that time a mountain sneezed and 20,000 people stopped existing. Yeah, you won't survive what happened next, but let's pretend it's August 24th, 79 AD, and you somehow woke up in the worst possible location on Earth. The mountain's been quiet. Too quiet. People rebuilt after the earthquake 17 years ago, so obviously nobody's worried. Spoiler alert, they should have been terrified. Before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy watching people die slowly to volcanology. I'm not going to chase you with a flaming rock over it. And hey, drop your thoughts in the comments. Does dying in your sleep sound better than pyroclastic flow? I love knowing who else is awake during these quiet hours, thinking about death. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, close the tab where you're supposed to be working, and let's ease into tonight's journey together, because you're about to experience the most documented death in history, preserved so perfectly that we can see exactly how you looked when the mountain decided you were no longer worth living. You wake up in Pompeii on a morning that feels like every other morning. Your pillow pokes you, your tunic smells terrible, the rooster outside is having a spiritual crisis. You have no idea that in about 12 hours you're going to become a statue made of ash. Not the marble kind, but the dead kind. The city hums with life. People arguing over goats, someone drawing a penis on a wall. The baker's slave cursing his job, and looming in the distance, so peaceful it's basically mocking you, sits Mount Vesuvius. That mountain is about to go absolutely insane, and you're going to have a front row seat right up until you die horribly. What happens next isn't just a story. It's science. It's tragedy. It's preserved human suffering so perfect that teenagers on field trips will see your last moments and understand that nature doesn't care if you're important. So settle in. This isn't going to end well. Not for you, not for anyone in this city. Let's talk about your last day on Earth. You wake up on August 24th, 79 AD, in Pompeii. Your pillow is stuffed with straw that pokes through the linen like tiny wooden fingers. The morning light filters through the gaps in your shutters, painting amber stripes across the packed dirt floor. Outside, someone's rooster is having an existential crisis about whether to crow again. You don't know it yet, but in about 12 hours, you're going to become a statue made of ash. Not the artistic kind, the dead kind. You stretch, and your joints pop like bubble wrap that hasn't been invented yet. The air smells like bread from the bakery 3 doors down, mixed with that special Pompeii morning perfume of donkey dung and fish sauce. It's basically ancient Febreze, except it makes everything worse. Your neighbour is already awake, arguing with his wife about something involving a goat. Their voices carry through the thin walls like your modern apartment when your neighbours decide 3 AM is the perfect time to rearrange furniture. Here's the thing about living in Pompeii. It's actually pretty sweet. You're in a thriving Roman city of maybe 20,000 people, which in 79 AD terms makes it basically Manhattan. There's running water, which won't be common again in Europe for like another 1,000 years. You've got restaurants, bars, bathhouses, and more brothels per square mile than Vegas. The graffiti on the walls is surprisingly similar to modern bathroom stalls except in Latin. Someone down the street literally wrote "Gaius was here" on a wall, proving that humans have always been basic. You roll out of bed and your feet hit the cold stone floor. That wake-up jolt hits different when you don't have fuzzy slippers. You grab yesterday's tunic from the stool where you tossed it. It smells like you, which is to say, it smells like someone who bathes maybe twice a week if you're fancy. You're not fancy. The public baths cost money, and you spent your last coins on that questionable fish sauce that's definitely going to give you food poisoning, if you live long enough for that to matter. Mount Vesuvius looms in the distance like that friend who seems chill, but you know has anger management issues. It's been rumbling lately, but mountains do that, right? There was that earthquake 17 years ago that knocked down half the town. People rebuilt. Life went on. The mountain's covered in vineyards now, producing wine so good that future archaeologists will find amphorae stamped with Gran Reserve, or whatever the Latin equivalent was. The soil's incredibly fertile thanks to all that volcanic ash from previous eruptions. Previous eruptions that nobody remembers because the last big one was 1,800 years ago. Your great times infinity grandparents weren't even a gleam in some Neolithic farmer's eye yet. You head outside and the street's already busy. Cartwheels grinding over stone make that satisfying ancient city soundtrack. A baker's slave hauls sacks of grain. A group of kids chase a dog that definitely stole someone's breakfast. 2 old men sit outside the tavern even though it's barely past dawn, because day drinking is apparently timeless. The fuller's shop reeks of human urine, which they used to clean clothes, because Romans were hardcore about recycling before it was trendy. You pass by the Thermopolium, which is basically an ancient McDonald's. The owner's ladling out something that might be lentil stew or might be last week's lentil stew with this week's mystery meat added. The smell makes your stomach growl and your survival instincts scream simultaneously. You keep walking. There's a fancy dinner party tonight at Marcus whoever's house, and you're hoping to score an invitation through your cousin who knows a guy who knows a guy. Roman networking, same as modern networking, except with more togas and less LinkedIn. The morning feels normal, aggressively normal. Birds chirping, people complaining about taxes. Someone's drawing a crude picture of gladiator equipment on a wall. You have no idea that Vesuvius has been building pressure for centuries. The magma chamber's been filling up like a cosmic water balloon, except instead of water it's 832 diameter liquid rock mixed with enough gas to level a city, or several cities. The mountain's about to demonstrate what geologists will later call a Plinian eruption, named after the guy who's going to die trying to rescue people today. But that's getting ahead of ourselves. You stop at the fountain to fill your water jug. The water's clean, flowing down from the mountains through aqueducts that are engineering marvels. A woman next to you complains about the heat. It's been weirdly hot lately, and the springs that usually flow have dried up. The animals have been acting strange too. Dogs howling at nothing. Birds flying in weird patterns, that sort of thing. If this was a horror movie, the audience would be screaming at you to leave town. But it's not a movie, it's Tuesday, and you've got work to do. You look up at Vesuvius one more time. There's a thin wisp of what looks like smoke coming from the top. Or maybe it's just morning mist. Hard to tell. You shrug and head toward the forum. You've got business to handle, people to see, a life to live, for about 6 more hours. Around noon, you're haggling with a merchant over the price of olive oil when the world hiccups. Not an earthquake exactly. More like the ground cleared its throat. The amphorae on the merchant's shelf rattle. Everyone freezes for a second, that universal moment of, "Did you feel that?" Then someone laughs nervously and life continues. Romans are used to tremors. The whole region sits on fault lines like a house built on jello. You go back to arguing about whether 3 sesterces is highway robbery for medium-grade oil. Then someone points at the mountain. Look at that. What you see coming out of Vesuvius looks like a giant pine tree made of smoke. It shoots straight up, impossibly high, then spreads out at the top like an umbrella designed by someone who hates people. The column is already miles high and growing. It's the colour of dirty concrete mixed with ash, and it's moving wrong. Smoke doesn't behave like that. Smoke doesn't look solid. The clever ones, the ones who've read their Aristotle or travelled enough to know that mountains shouldn't cosplay as trees, are already heading for the gates. But most people just stand there gawking like tourists at Times Square. Someone makes a joke about the gods having indigestion. Another person suggests it's a sign that the gladiator games next week will be extra spectacular. Nobody says the word volcano because that word doesn't exist yet. Vulcan is just the god of the forge, not a classification for mountains that explode. Within an hour, the day turns to twilight. Not a gentle sunset dimming, but like someone threw a blanket over the sun. The air gets thick. You can taste it, metallic and bitter, like licking a copper coin that's been sitting in the ash. Then the pumice starts falling. Little white rocks, light as foam, pattering down like hail. At first, it's almost pretty. Kids run around trying to catch them. Someone jokes it's snowing in August, but the rocks keep coming, and they're getting bigger. You're smart enough to realise this is bad. You head home to grab your stuff, or what passes for stuff when you own 3 tunics and a decent pair of sandals. The streets are chaos now. People are running in every direction, which means nobody's actually going anywhere. A cart tips over, spilling grain across the road. Someone's trying to herd chickens into a basket. A rich woman is screaming at her slaves to save her jewellery box while her husband yells at her to forget the damn box and run. The pumice is ankle deep now and still falling. Walking through it is like trying to run on a beach made of popcorn. Every step sinks and slides. You wrap a cloth around your face, but the dust gets through anyway. Your eyes water. Your throat burns. Everyone looks like ghosts covered in white ash, stumbling through streets that an hour ago were familiar and now look like the moon's surface if the moon was trying to kill you. You make it home and grab your money pouch, all 8 coins that represent your entire fortune. You throw your winter cloak over your shoulders even though it's August because something tells you you're going to need protection from whatever's falling. You can hear your neighbours through the walls. Someone's praying, someone's crying. Someone's still trying to save their furniture like this is just a really aggressive hailstorm. The smart play is to run. Get out of the city, get as far from the mountain as possible, but the gates are jammed with people, carts, animals, and panic. It's a human traffic jam with a soundtrack of screaming and prayers. Some people give up and head back to their homes to wait it out. It'll pass, they say. Remember the earthquake. We survived that. These people will be found 1900 years later in their beds, in their gardens, huddled in corners. They bet on staying and lost everything. You push through the crowd at the Herculaneum gate. Bodies press against you, hot and stinking of fear sweat. A child is screaming somewhere in the mass of people. Someone's dog bites someone else. A fight breaks out over a cart blocking the exit. You're not thinking about dignity or possessions anymore. You're thinking about the next breath, the next step, the next second of not being crushed by the crowd or the falling sky. But here's where fate laughs at you. Even if you make it out of the city, even if you run as fast as your legs can carry you, you're not going to outrun what's coming, because Vesuvius isn't just ejecting pumice and ash. It's building up to something worse. The column of ash and gas shooting into the stratosphere weighs millions of tons, and what goes up must come down. When it does, it won't fall gently like snow. It'll race down the mountain at highway speeds, hot enough to boil your blood in your veins. You finally squeeze through the gate and stumble into the countryside. Behind you, Pompeii is disappearing under a white blanket. You can barely see the top of the amphitheatre. The Temple of Jupiter is a vague shadow. You keep moving, but you're basically running in a blizzard made of rocks. Every breath hurts. Your sandals are falling apart from the heat of the pumice. You have no idea where you're going, just away, away, away. You've made it maybe 2 miles from the city walls when your body starts giving up. Not dramatically, not all at once, but in small betrayals. Your legs shake with each step through the knee-deep pumice. Your lungs burn like you've been breathing fiberglass, which isn't far from the truth. The volcanic ash is basically microscopic glass shards, and every breath is shredding your airways like internal sandpaper. Fun fact, that's not fun at all. Modern doctors who've studied Pompeii victims found their lungs were lacerated from the inside out. The countryside that was supposed to be your salvation looks like someone dumped flour over everything and then set the flour on fire. Trees are bending under the weight of ash. Birds are falling from the sky mid-flight, their little bodies thumping into the white drifts like feathered meteorites. A cow stands in a field, so covered in pumice it looks like a badly made statue mooing in confusion. You'd feel bad for it if you weren't pretty sure you look exactly the same. You find what might be a farm building, or might be a rich person's summer villa. It's hard to tell when everything's buried under 3 feet of volcanic dandruff. The door is open, probably because the owners ran and didn't bother with locks. You stumble inside and immediately trip over something soft. It's a person. Was a person. They're not moving. Their face is covered with a cloth that didn't help. You step over them carefully, trying not to think about how you're walking through someone's last moment. The house is full of other refugees, maybe a dozen people huddled in what was probably a nice dining room before the apocalypse redecorated. There's a woman holding 2 children, an old man praying to household gods that aren't listening, a teenage boy who keeps saying it'll stop soon, like he's trying to convince reality to cooperate. Nobody talks about the body by the door. Nobody talks much at all. When breathing hurts, conversation becomes optional. You find a corner and collapse. Your throat feels like you've been gargling gravel. When you cough, which is constantly, the stuff that comes up is black and gritty. Someone passes you a wine jug and you take a swig. It tastes like disappointment and sulphur, but at least it's wet. You pour some on the edge of your cloak and hold it over your face. It helps for about 30 seconds before the cloth is clogged with ash again. Outside, the pumice fall is slowing down. People start to hope. "See," says the teenage boy, "it's ending." But you notice something that makes your stomach drop like an elevator with cut cables. The sounds are changing. The steady patter of falling rocks is being replaced by something else. A rumbling, like thunder that doesn't stop. The ground vibrates. The walls creak. Dust falls from the ceiling beams. Something big is coming. Here's what you don't know, because volcanology hasn't been invented yet. The eruption column that's been shooting straight up for hours has gotten too heavy. The gas pressure from the volcano can't support it anymore. It's about to collapse. And when it does, all that superheated ash and gas won't just fall down. It'll avalanche down the mountainsides at speeds that would get you a ticket on most highways. The technical term is pyroclastic flow, but you could also call it death moving at 100 miles per hour. The temperature outside is rising, not gradually like a summer day warming up, but fast, like someone opened an oven door. The air shimmers. You can smell things burning that shouldn't be able to burn. Stone, dirt. The metal fittings on the door are too hot to touch. The woman with the children starts crying, not loudly. Just steady tears cutting tracks through the ash on her face. She knows. Maybe not the specifics, but she knows this is the end of something. You peek out a window and immediately wish you hadn't. The mountain is glowing. Not metaphorically. Actually glowing like the world's angriest nightlight. Rivers of orange are pouring down its slopes, but they're not lava. It's superheated gas and ash, moving like liquid death, heading straight for you at speeds that make running pointless. It's beautiful in the way that poisonous things are beautiful, mesmerizing and absolutely fatal. The old man stops praying and starts laughing. Not happy laughter, but the kind that happens when your brain can't process what it's seeing. "The gods," he says. "The gods have gone mad." Someone else says, "We should run," but nobody moves. Where would you go? The death cloud is moving faster than a horse can gallop. You'd need a Ferrari to outrun it, and those won't be invented for another 1,869 years. The room gets hotter. People start stripping off their cloaks, their tunics. Dignity forgotten in the face of the heat. The air is so hot now that breathing feels like swallowing fire. The wooden furniture starts to smoke. The wine in the jug is literally boiling. Someone tries to open the door to get air, but the metal handle burns their hand. They scream, but it sounds muffled, like the air is too thick to carry sound properly. You close your eyes and think about this morning. Was it really just this morning? When your biggest worry was the price of olive oil? When the mountain was just a mountain with nice vineyards? You think about the party you were supposed to crash tonight. Marcus, whoever is probably dead now, or running, or about to be running, then about to be dead. The walls are making sounds they shouldn't make, cracking, popping, like joints before they dislocate. The teenage boy isn't saying it'll stop soon anymore. He's holding his mother's hand and whispering something that might be a prayer or might be goodbye. The woman with the children is singing softly, a lullaby, as if she could rock them to sleep through the end of the world. Then the pyroclastic surge hits. The pyroclastic surge doesn't knock on the door. It removes the door, the frame, and most of the wall, like an angry deity playing Jenga. The superheated gas cloud punches through the building at roughly 180 miles per hour, which is faster than a hurricane and approximately 179 miles per hour faster than you can run. The temperature spike is so instant that your nerve endings don't even have time to send the ouch signal to your brain before they're vaporized. Death arrives in milliseconds, dressed as air that's forgotten how to be breathable. Here's what's actually happening to you on a molecular level, because science is metal like that. The surge is around 600 degrees, which is hot enough to melt lead, but not quite hot enough to melt copper. a fact that future archaeologists will use to figure out exactly how screwed you were. Your body is about 60% water. At 600 degrees Celsius, that water doesn't just evaporate, it flash boils. Your blood literally turns to steam in your veins. Your brain, which is 73% water, experiences what scientists will diplomatically call rapid thermal shock and what everyone else would call exploding. The heat causes your muscles to contract violently and instantly, pulling you into what's known as a pugilistic pose, arms bent, fists raised, like you're trying to box with death. You lost, obviously, but future tourists will think you went down fighting. Your soft tissues vaporize, your bones crack from the thermal shock. Any metal jewellery you're wearing brands itself into what's left of your skin. That nice bronze fibula holding your cloak. It's now permanently part of your archaeological record. But here's the truly messed up part. Some researchers think you might have been conscious for a fraction of a second. Not long enough to feel pain, but maybe long enough for your brain to register that something has gone catastrophically wrong. Like that moment when you miss a step on the stairs, except instead of catching yourself, you turn into a monument to bad timing. The surge doesn't just kill you, it entombs you. The fine ash flows into every space, every crevice, every hollow. It fills your mouth, your throat, your lungs. Not that you're using them anymore, but the ash creates a perfect mould of your internal airways that scientists will study 2,000 years later. They'll be able to tell what your last breath looked like. Spoiler, it looked like panic. Around you, the same thing is happening to everyone else in the room. The mother and children are frozen mid-embrace. The old man is caught in his final prayer position. The teenage boy's last word is literally captured in the position of his jaw. It's like the world's most horrific game of freeze tag, except nobody gets to unfreeze. Ever. The building itself is having a bad time. Wood combusts instantly. Anything organic just ceases. The walls crack from the thermal expansion. The roof tiles, made to withstand normal Italian summers, shatter like potato chips under a sledgehammer. The pretty frescoes on the walls depicting mythological scenes and geometric patterns bubble and peel. In some places, the pigments will actually be preserved by the ash, giving future archaeologists perfect examples of Roman interior design. Your death is literally preserving art history. Your welcome museums. Outside, the surge continues its speedrun through the countryside. It's not slowing down for anything. Trees are stripped of bark and leaves in nanoseconds, leaving skeletal trunks that immediately carbonize. Any animals in the path don't even have time to run. They're just suddenly very dead and very preserved. A dog on a chain will be found centuries later, twisted in its final attempt to escape. Donkeys in stables, chickens in coops, that confused cow from earlier. All of them become victims of physics they couldn't possibly understand. The surge cloud is technically a fluid, but it behaves like a solid when it hits you because of its density. It's carrying billions of tiny particles of ash and pumice, superheated and moving fast enough to sandblast skin from bone if the heat hadn't already handled that problem. The particles are so fine they behave like a liquid, flowing around obstacles, through windows, under doors. There's no hiding from physics this aggressive. What's wild is that just a few miles away people are still alive, watching this cloud of death roll across the landscape like the world's worst weather phenomenon. They can see it coming. They can see it swallow Pompeii, Herculaneum, Stabii. They're far enough away that they'll survive, traumatized but breathing, to tell the tale. Pliny the Younger is watching from Misenum, taking notes that will become the only eyewitness account of a volcanic eruption for the next 1,000 years. He describes the cloud as looking like a pine tree, which is weirdly poetic for something that just murdered 16,000 people. The temperature varies depending on where you died. If you were in Herculaneum, closer to the volcano, you got hit with temperatures up to 900 Grad. Your brain didn't just boil, it possibly vitrified, turning to glass. Some skulls found there show evidence of explosion from internal pressure. Your head literally popped like popcorn, except instead of a tasty snack, you became an archaeological case study in thermodynamics. In Pompeii, you got the budget version of death at a mere 600 degree, still instantly fatal, but your body stayed more intact. Lucky you. You're going to be a plaster cast that traumatises schoolchildren on field trips for centuries to come. Some of you will become famous. Archaeologists will give you nicknames like the Dog, the Lovers, or that guy who died masturbating, because apparently that's how one person decided to spend the apocalypse. Let's talk about what happens to your body in exquisite, horrible detail, because if you're going to die in one of history's most famous natural disasters, you might as well understand the mechanics. When the pyroclastic surge hits, your death happens in stages, but these stages are measured in fractions of seconds. It's like a really efficient factory line, except the product is human extinction. Stage 1. Thermal shock. The surge temperature hits your skin at 600 degree minimum. Your epidermis, the outer layer of skin, doesn't burn, it ablates. That's a fancy word for turns directly from solid to gas without bothering to be liquid first. It's like freeze-drying in reverse. Your skin literally evaporates. The nerves that would normally scream hot, hot, hot to your brain are vaporized before they can complete the message. It's the ultimate ghosting. Your nervous system doesn't even get to send a goodbye text. Stage 2. The moisture in your body flash boils. Every cell in your body contains water. At these temperatures, that water turns to steam instantly, expanding to 600 times its liquid volume. Your cells basically explode from the inside out like microscopic water balloons in a microwave. This happens everywhere simultaneously. Your organs, your muscles, your brain. It's like being pressure cooked from the inside, except faster and with no delicious seasoning. Your blood, which was happily doing its job carrying oxygen around, suddenly becomes steam. This creates massive internal pressure. Your blood vessels rupture, your organs hemorrhage. In Herculaneum, they found skeletons with red and black mineral residues on the bones. That's literally the iron from vaporized blood that condensed back onto the skeleton. You're becoming your own crime scene evidence, except the crime is physics, and physics always wins. Stage 3. Muscle contraction. The extreme heat causes all your muscles to contract simultaneously and violently. This isn't a cramp, it's every muscle fibre shrinking at once. You're pulled into that classic pugilistic pose, arms bent, fists up, legs drawn up toward your torso. Future people will think you died fighting, but really your body's just following the laws of thermodynamics. Your tendons shrink, your ligaments snap like overstretched rubber bands. The sound would be horrific if anyone was alive to hear it. Here's a fun fact that's actually 0% fun. Your brain takes slightly longer to die than the rest of you. We're talking milliseconds, but still. Your brain is protected by your skull and the cerebrospinal fluid around it. That fluid boils, creating steam pressure inside your skull. In some victims, this pressure was enough to explode the skull outward. In others, the brain tissue was essentially cooked in place. Some recent studies found vitrified brain tissue, brain turned to glass, in victims from Herculaneum. Imagine explaining that to someone. How did you die? My brain became glass. Cool, totally normal. Your bones are having their own special nightmare. The extreme temperature difference between the outside heat and your internal temperature causes them to crack. It's like putting a cold glass in hot water, except you're the glass and the hot water is Satan's breath. The cracks follow predictable patterns that forensic anthropologists will study obsessively 2 millennia later. They'll be able to tell which direction the heat came from based on how your bones broke. You're becoming a human compass pointing toward death. The soft tissues that don't vaporize immediately begin to carbonize. You're literally turning into charcoal. In some victims, the carbonization was so complete that their remains could theoretically be used for drawing, though that would be deeply weird and definitely cursed. The fat in your body renders out like you're the world's most tragic bacon. It seeps into the ash around you, creating a different mineral composition that archaeologists will use to identify where bodies decomposed. Your teeth, weirdly, do pretty well. Tooth enamel is the hardest substance in the human body and can withstand temperatures up to 1,000 degrees for short periods. Your teeth will outlast almost everything else. sitting there in your skull like little monuments to your formerly functional mouth. Future scientists will study them to figure out what you ate, where you grew up, and whether you had access to good dental care. You didn't. It's ancient Rome. Everyone's teeth were terrible. If you were wearing clothes, they're having their own chemical adventure. Wool carbonizes but leaves an impression in the ash. Linen vanishes completely. Leather shrinks and then burns. Any dyes in the fabric might leave mineral traces. That expensive purple cloak you were so proud of? It's contributing a few molecules of murex dye to the ash layer. Congratulations. You're dying fashionably. Metal objects fare better than you do. That bronze coin in your purse, it'll survive just fine, maybe with a bit of melting around the edges. Gold jewellery doesn't even notice the heat. Iron tools might oxidise a bit faster. These objects will help archaeologists date your death and figure out your social status. That silver ring says you had some money. Those hobnails in your boots say you did a lot of walking. Every object becomes a clue in the world's most depressing detective story. The ash that's killing you is also preserving you. As your body decays over the coming months and years, it leaves a void in the hardened ash. That void is a perfect negative image of your final moment. When Giuseppe Fiorelli figures out how to fill these voids with plaster in 1863, he'll create casts that show your exact position, the folds in your clothes, the expression on your face. You're becoming a statue of yourself, which would be kind of cool if you weren't, dead. The pyroclastic surge isn't just hot air having a bad day. It's a complex cocktail of gases and particles that would make a chemistry teacher weep with either joy or terror, depending on their disposition. The main components are superheated steam, carbon dioxide, sulfur dioxide, hydrogen sulfide and hydrogen chloride, plus a delightful mixture of pulverized rock, volcanic glass, and whatever organic material is vaporized along the way. It's basically if someone put the atmosphere, a rock collection, and a chemistry set in a blender, set it on fire, and then threw it at you at NASCAR speeds. The sulfur dioxide is particularly nasty. When it hits the moisture in your lungs, in the fraction of a second before your lungs stop existing, it forms sulfuric acid. You're literally breathing battery acid, except the acid is also 600 degrees and moving at hurricane force. The hydrogen chloride becomes hydrochloric acid on contact with any moisture. Your mucous membranes don't just burn, they dissolve. It's like your body is being attacked by temperature, pressure and chemistry simultaneously. You're dying in IMAX 3D with surround sound, except you're the screen. The ash particles themselves are microscopic knives. Volcanic ash isn't like fireplace ash. It's pulverized rock, full of sharp, angular fragments of volcanic glass. Each particle is covered in tiny hooks and barbs that would normally tear up your lungs over hours or days of breathing them. But at these temperatures and speeds, they're just adding insult to injury, or injury to death. Death to more death? The point is, everything's trying to kill you, and everything is succeeding. The density of the surge is about 10 to 100 kilograms per cubic meter. That might not sound like much, but when it's moving at 100 plus miles per hour, it hits with the force of a concrete wall made of fire. The dynamic pressure alone, that's the force of the moving fluid, is enough to collapse buildings. You're not just being cooked, you're being crushed by air that's forgotten it's supposed to be breathable. Here's where it gets even more scientifically bonkers. The surge creates its own weather. The temperature difference between the surge and the regular air creates massive convection currents. Lightning forms in the ash cloud, volcanic lightning which is exactly as metal as it sounds. You're dying in a thunderstorm made of glass and fire while the mountain shoots lightning at the sky. If this was a movie, people would complain it was too over the top. The surge also creates something called base surge, a ring of superheated gas that hugs the ground and flows outward in all directions. It's like the pyroclastic flow's evil little brother, moving even faster and getting into places the main flow might miss. It races ahead of the main surge, flash-heating everything in its path. So even if you somehow avoided the main flow, the base surge would get you. It's redundancy in murder form. The chemical composition of the surge varies depending on what it's encountered. As it moves through the city, it picks up calcium from vaporized limestone buildings, sodium from any salt stores, copper from bronze objects. It's creating a unique chemical fingerprint that geologists will use to track its exact path 2,000 years later. Your death is contributing to science, though you probably would have preferred to contribute while alive. The particles in the surge are so fine they behave like a fluid. They flow around obstacles, through keyholes, down chimneys. They find every possible entrance into every possible shelter. People who barricaded themselves in sealed rooms thinking they could wait it out were found in positions suggesting they died just as quickly as those outside. The surge doesn't respect your survival strategies. It's an equal opportunity destroyer. Temperature gradients in the surge create different death zones. The core might be 900 degrees, while the edges cool to a merely fatal 400 degrees. If you're on the edge of the flow, you might live for a whole second longer than someone in the centre. Congratulations on your marginally extended mortality. Your prize is dying slightly slower, but still definitely dying. The surge deposits ash in distinct layers that scientists call surge deposits. Each surge leaves its own signature, different particle sizes, different temperatures, different chemical compositions. Pompeii was hit by at least 6 surges over 2 days. The first one probably killed everyone who was still alive. The others were just volcano overkill, like Vesuvius wanted to make absolutely sure nobody was getting back up. Some of the gases in the surge are heavier than air and pool in low-lying areas. Carbon dioxide, being denser than regular air, flows downhill like an invisible river of death. It fills basements, sewers, any depression in the ground. Even if you somehow survived the heat and the impact, you'd suffocate in pockets of unbreathable gas. The volcano is playing 3-dimensional chess with your life, and you don't even know the rules. Fast forward 1,244 years. It's 1823, and someone digging in what used to be Pompeii finds weird voids in the solidified ash. They're U-shaped holes where you used to be. Your body decomposed centuries ago, leaving behind a perfect negative space of your final moment. Giuseppe Fiorelli won't figure out the plaster casting technique for another 40 years. But when he does, you're about to become immortal in the worst possible way. Here's the process. They find your void, drill a hole into it, and pour in liquid plaster like the world's most morbid craft project. When it hardens and they chip away the surrounding ash, there you are, a 3-dimensional snapshot of your death. Every fold in your clothes, every finger position, the expression on your face if you still had a face when you died. Some of you are so well preserved that scientists can see your hairstyles, your sandal straps, the way you tried to cover your mouth with your tunic in those final moments. You're basically an ancient Roman action figure, except the action is dying horribly. The plaster casts are like ancient selfies, except instead of duck lips, you're making the "I'm being murdered by a mountain" face. Scientists study every detail. That guy clutching a bag of coins, he thought money would matter in the afterlife. That family huddled together. They died holding each other, which is either heartwarming or heartbreaking depending on your tolerance for tragic irony. That person covering their face, they were trying to filter the air through their clothes like a makeshift gas mask that absolutely didn't work. Modern technology makes your death even more educational. CT scans reveal your bones inside the plaster. DNA analysis tells us you weren't all related to each other, despite dying in the same rooms. Some of you were African, some Middle Eastern, some Nordic. Pompeii was basically ancient Rome's version of New York City, diverse, crowded, and ultimately doomed. Isotope analysis of your teeth reveals where you grew up, what you ate, whether you were local or a trader just passing through on the worst possible day. Your bones tell stories you never could. That healed fracture in your arm, you broke it as a kid and it set wrong because ancient Roman healthcare was basically rub some olive oil on it and pray. Those worn down teeth, too much grit in your bread from stone ground flour. That calcium deficiency, you were probably pregnant multiple times. Science is reading your medical history like your skeleton is WebMD with better accuracy. The positions you died in are mathematically consistent with instantaneous death. You're not in random poses. You're in the exact positions physics would predict for bodies exposed to extreme heat. Arms bent at specific angles, spines curved in predictable ways. You're conforming to equations that won't be written for another 2 millennia. Death turned you into a math problem with a really depressing solution. Some of you have become celebrities. The dog is probably the most famous dead animal in history, twisted in his final moment trying to escape his chain. School children see your plaster cast and immediately understand that nature doesn't care about your feelings. The lovers aren't actually lovers. Recent analysis shows they're two men, possibly brothers or friends, but the name stuck because humans are romantics even about death. The pregnant woman wasn't actually pregnant, just had a lot of gas from decomposition. Sorry for the mix-up. The really weird thing, you're better preserved than many Egyptian mummies. The ash created an airtight seal that prevented normal decomposition. Your bones didn't scatter, your possessions stayed exactly where you dropped them. You're like a perfectly preserved crime scene where the criminal was a mountain and the crime was everything. Scientists can tell what time you died based on your location and which surge deposit you're in. If you're in the first layer, you died around 1 a.m. on August 25th. Second layer, maybe 6:30 a.m. It's like geological stratigraphy, except each layer represents a wave of death instead of millions of years of sediment. You're part of a temporal sandwich where the filling is human tragedy. Your stuff is almost as informative as your corpse. That bread in the oven, carbonized but still recognizable. It tells us about Roman baking techniques and grain types. Those dice in your pocket? Romans loved gambling even during apocalypses. That medical kit with surgical tools. Someone was a doctor who couldn't heal volcanic eruption. Every object is a footnote in the encyclopedia of things that didn't help when the mountain exploded. The graffiti you left on walls survived too. Marcus Loves Livia is preserved in ash for all eternity. Someone wrote Gaius made bread here like an ancient Yelp review. Another person carved profitable outside their shop, which is ironic because profit requires being alive. The bathroom graffiti is surprisingly modern. Jokes about bodily functions, insults about people's mothers, the occasional crude drawing. Humans have always been the same, we just die in different ways now. Your city's layout, preserved perfectly under the ash, revolutionized archaeology. Before Pompeii, people had to guess what Roman cities looked like. Now we know exactly where you bought your bread, where you got drunk, where you went to watch gladiators turn each other into ancient hamburger meat. The bakeries still have millstones. The bars still have price lists on the walls. The brothel has a menu of services with helpful illustrations for the illiterate. You've created the world's most complete snapshot of daily Roman life. You just had to die horribly to do it. Let's talk about what your death cost, economically speaking. Pompeii wasn't just some backwater town. It was a thriving commercial hub. When Vesuvius deleted it from existence, it took out approximately 20,000 people and millions of sesterces worth of infrastructure. That's like if someone nuclear bombed Silicon Valley, except instead of losing social media platforms, Rome lost a major port and wine production centre. The immediate economic impact was catastrophic. Pompeii was a major exporter of wine. Garum, that fermented fish sauce Romans put on everything like ancient ketchup, and textiles. The eruption destroyed not just the current inventory, but the entire production capacity. Imagine if every vineyard in Napa Valley vanished overnight, along with all the workers who knew how to make wine. That's what happened to the Roman wine industry in Campania. The price of garum probably skyrocketed across the empire. This stuff was the Roman equivalent of soy sauce. They put it on everything. Pompeii had massive garum production facilities. The eruption took out giant vats of fermenting fish guts, which honestly might have improved the local smell, except everyone who could smell was dead. The rest of Rome had to find new suppliers, driving up prices and probably lowering quality. Your death made everyone's dinner more expensive and less tasty. Real estate values in the surrounding areas went through a complex dance. On one hand, property near an active volcano became slightly less desirable, what with the might explode and kill everyone factor. On the other hand, all that volcanic ash made the soil incredibly fertile once things cooled down. It's like the world's most extreme urban renewal project. Destroy everything, then make the land perfect for farming. Your body contributed nitrogen to the soil. You're literally fertilizer now. The Roman government's response was surprisingly modern. Emperor Titus appointed 2 former consuls to coordinate disaster relief, basically creating ancient FEMA. They redistributed the property of those who died without heirs, using the money to help survivors. If you died without a will, congratulations, you just made an involuntary donation to disaster relief. The government also had to deal with massive insurance claims, property disputes, and inheritance issues. Death created paperwork that lasted longer than most of the bodies. Some people got rich from your death. Salvagers descended on the city once it cooled, tunnelling through the ash to loot valuables. They left graffiti saying things like "house tunneled" to mark where they'd already stolen everything worth taking. It's like ancient disaster capitalism. Your gold jewellery, your silver coins, your nice furniture, all redistributed to people with better timing and fewer scruples. The loss of human capital was even worse than the property damage. Pompeii had skilled artisans, experienced merchants, educated administrators. When they died, their knowledge died with them. Imagine losing every expert in a field simultaneously. No one to train apprentices, no one to maintain trade relationships, no one who knows the secret recipe for that really good fish sauce. The Roman economy had to rebuild entire supply chains from scratch. The port facilities at Pompeii were a total loss. This wasn't just a pier where boats parked. It was a complex system of warehouses, customs houses, and trading offices, all gone. Trade routes had to be completely reorganised. Ships that used to dock at Pompeii had to find new ports, creating congestion and delays throughout the Mediterranean. Your death caused shipping delays that probably annoyed merchants from Egypt to Britain. The psychological economic impact was huge too. Investors became wary of putting money into properties near volcanoes, which in Italy is basically everywhere. Insurance premiums for coastal properties went up. People started keeping their wealth in more portable forms. Jewellery, coins, things you could grab when the mountain started smoking. The Roman real estate market developed its first understanding of natural disaster risk, thanks to you being turned into a cautionary tale. Tourism, ironically, eventually became the area's main industry. Starting in the 18th century, wealthy Europeans began visiting the excavations. By the 19th century, it was a full-blown tourist attraction. Today, Pompeii gets over 2.5 million visitors annually, generating hundreds of millions of euros. Your death is now a major economic driver for modern Italy. You're creating more revenue as a corpse than you ever did alive. That's either inspiring or depressing, depending on how you look at it. You've become a meme before memes existed. Every disaster movie, every apocalypse story, every ancient civilization destroyed by nature narrative owes something to your death. You're the template for catastrophe. When Hollywood wants to show nature's fury, they reference Pompeii. When video games need a tragic backstory, they cite Vesuvius. You're not just dead, you're culturally immortal in the weirdest way possible. The Victorians were obsessed with you. They painted massive canvases of your death, full of dramatic poses and conveniently attractive dying people. The Last Day of Pompeii by Karl Breoloff is basically ancient disaster porn. Everyone's dying dramatically while still managing to look hot. The real you died covered in ash, contorted in agony, probably pooping yourself from fear. The painted you dies like a Renaissance model who happened to encounter some light volcanic activity. Every few years, Hollywood makes another Pompeii movie. They always get it wrong. The 2014 film Pompeii added a gladiator love story because apparently volcanic eruption isn't dramatic enough. It's like making Titanic, but adding dinosaurs. The movies always show lava flowing through the streets. You didn't die from lava. Lava is slow. You could outwalk it. You died from superheated gas moving at highway speeds, but attacked by very hot air doesn't look as cool on a movie poster. In literature, you're equally misrepresented. Edward Bulwer-Lytton's The Last Days of Pompeii turned your death into a Victorian morality tale. The good Christians survive, historically inaccurate. The pagans die, everyone died, and there's a love triangle because even volcanic eruptions need romantic subplots. The book was a bestseller for decades. Your death became entertainment for people who thought ankles were scandalous. Modern video games love you too. Assassin's Creed has probably included Pompeii and some convoluted plot about ancient aliens or whatever. Call of Duty had a multiplayer map set in Pompeii because nothing says fun gameplay like fighting in a city where thousands died horribly. You're a backdrop for virtual violence, which is weird considering you experienced actual violence from a mountain. The academic obsession with you is even weirder. There are entire conferences devoted to your death. Scholars write dissertations about your bathroom habits. There's probably someone right now getting a PhD in Pompeian graffiti as social commentary, or economic implications of volcanic destruction in 1st century Rome. You're generating more academic papers than most living people. Your plaster casts have become Instagram fodder. Tourists take selfies with your preserved corpse like you're a celebrity. Here's me with the dead dog. Pompeii. Blessed. No filter. It's deeply weird that your worst moment has become someone's vacation photo. You're generating likes and comments 2,000 years after dying. That's either the ultimate influence or the ultimate insult. Museums fight over who gets to display you. Your plaster casts tour the world like a very depressing rock band. Coming this summer to the British Museum, Dead Romans. People pay $20 to stare at your preserved agony. Gift shops sell miniature versions of your death pose. You can buy a keychain of the dog dying. Capitalism has found a way to monetize your mortality. The scientific papers about you have the most mundane titles for the most horrific content. Analysis of thermal damage in skeletal remains from Pompeii sounds boring until you realise it's about how your bones cracked from boiling brain fluid. Dietary reconstruction, through coprolite analysis, is literally studying ancient poop to figure out what you ate before dying. Science has no chill when it comes to your corpse. Artists keep reimagining your death with modern twists. There's probably an NFT of your death pose out there. Someone's definitely written Pompeii fan fiction where you survive through time travel or magic or the power of friendship. Rule 34 of the internet definitely applies, though we're not going there. The point is, your death has transcended its original tragedy to become a cultural touchstone for every possible interpretation of disaster. If you were one of the lucky ones who died in the first phase of the eruption, before the pyroclastic flows arrived, you got to experience death by crushing instead of incineration. It's like choosing between regular or spicy at a restaurant, except both options kill you, and the restaurant is a volcano. About 38% of Pompeii's victims died this way, which makes it the hipster choice, dying before it was mainstream. Here's how it worked. The eruption column shot pumice and ash 20 miles into the stratosphere. What goes up must come down, and it came down on you at terminal velocity. These weren't gentle snowflakes of ash. These were golf ball to baseball-sized chunks of pumice falling like a very angry hailstorm. Each piece weighed almost nothing individually, but multiply that by billions, and you've got a problem. It's death by 1 trillion paper cuts, except the paper is made of rock and it's falling from space. The accumulation rate was about 6 inches per hour initially, which doesn't sound that bad until you realise your roof wasn't designed for the weight of liquid rock snow. Roman roofs were built to handle rain, maybe some regular snow if you lived up north. They were not built to handle several feet of volcanic debris. The pumice accumulated, got heavier as it compressed, and eventually your roof said nope, and introduced itself to your head at high velocity. The warning signs were there if you knew what to look for. First, the creaking. Wood under stress makes very specific sounds, like a ship in a storm or your knees after 40. Then the dust starts falling from the ceiling as the beams shift. Little streams of pumice find their way through gaps in the tiles. The whole house groans like it's got indigestion. Smart people left at this point. You, apparently, were not smart people. When the roof finally gave up, it didn't collapse neatly. It twisted, buckled, and came down in sections. The main beam probably went first, bringing down everything it supported. Roof tiles, wooden supports, and accumulated pumice all competed to see which could crush you fastest. If you were really unlucky, you got pinned but not immediately killed, giving you time to contemplate your poor life choices while slowly suffocating under architectural failure. The archaeology of crushing deaths is distinctly different from heat deaths. The bodies are found in different positions, defensive, trying to protect themselves, or running. One family was found with the parents shielding their children with their bodies. It didn't work, but the gesture was preserved for eternity. Another person was found holding a pillow over their head, like they thought soft fabric could stop a ceiling. Optimism, thy name is futile. Some people tried to wait it out in doorways, remembering that door frames are supposedly the safest place during earthquakes. Unfortunately, this wasn't an earthquake, and Pumice doesn't care about your structural engineering theories. The doorways filled with debris, trapping people in stone coffins of their own making. You're basically self-selecting for archaeological preservation. The weight of the pumice was extraordinary. By the time the roof started collapsing, there were several feet of accumulation, and that's roughly 100 pounds per square foot of roof. Your average Roman house had maybe 1,000 square feet of roof area. That's 50 tons of weight your ceiling wasn't designed for. It's like parking 25 cars on your roof and being surprised when it objects. The really messed up part? Some people survived the roof collapse only to be trapped in the rubble. They died slowly from injuries, dehydration, or suffocation as more pumice accumulated above them. Archaeologists have found scratch marks where people tried to claw their way out. They've found bodies in positions suggesting they lived for hours or even days after the collapse, slowly dying in darkness while the volcano continued its tantrum above. The economic damage from the collapses was severe even for those who evacuated. Coming back to find your house pancaked was probably disappointing. Insurance didn't cover acts of gods back then either. Mainly because insurance as we know it didn't exist, and also because the gods were clearly very acted up. If you survived but your house didn't, you were basically homeless with no FEMA to help you out. For those who avoided both the pyroclastic flows and the roof collapses, there was still good old-fashioned suffocation waiting in the wings. The ash in the air wasn't just annoying, it was actively hostile to your respiratory system. Every breath brought in microscopic particles of volcanic glass that cut up your airways like inhaling fiberglass insulation. Except the fiberglass is also hot and toxic. The ash was incredibly fine. Particles smaller than 10 micrometers, which is small enough to get deep into your lungs. For comparison, a human hair is about 70 micrometers wide. These particles could reach your alveoli, the tiny air sacs where oxygen exchange happens. Once there, they did what sharp glass does to delicate tissue, absolutely destroyed it. Your lungs basically became internal pincushions. As you breathed this toxic air, your body's natural response made things worse. Your airways produced mucus to try to trap and expel the particles. But volcanic ash plus mucus equals cement. You were literally creating concrete in your lungs. The more your body tried to protect itself, the more it sealed your airways shut. It's like your immune system was actively collaborating with the volcano to kill you. The symptoms started mild. A tickle in your throat like the beginning of a cold. Then coughing, first dry, then producing grey-black sputum that looked like you'd been eating charcoal. Your voice got hoarse, then disappeared entirely. Breathing became laborious, like trying to suck air through a straw, then like trying to suck air through a coffee stirrer, then like trying to suck air through nothing, because you're dead. Children and the elderly died first, their smaller or weaker airways clogging faster. Healthy adults lasted longer, which just meant more time to watch everyone else die before joining them. Some people tried breathing through cloth, creating makeshift masks. It helped about as much as using a screen door on a submarine. The particles were too fine, the concentration too high. You were basically trying to filter soup with a tennis racket. The psychological aspect of suffocation is particularly cruel. Unlike the instant death from pyroclastic flows, suffocation took hours. You had time to think about it, to panic, to try increasingly desperate measures. Some bodies were found with their throats apparently cut, possibly attempting emergency tracheotomies, or just choosing a faster death. When breathing becomes agony, any alternative starts looking attractive. Modern analysis of victims shows distinctive patterns of ash deposition in the airways. The finest particles made it all the way to the smallest bronchioles. Some victims' lungs were so full of ash that they've partially fossilised, creating perfect casts of the respiratory system. Scientists can trace exactly how far you managed to breathe the ash before your airways said absolutely not, and closed for business permanently. The ash wasn't just mechanically dangerous, it was chemically hostile too. Volcanic ash is highly acidic and full of fluorine, sulfur compounds, and other lung-unfriendly chemicals. It was essentially spray painting the inside of your lungs with industrial chemicals while also sandpapering them. Your respiratory system was being attacked on multiple fronts, like a medieval siege, but the castle is your lungs and everyone dies at the end. Environmental conditions made it worse. The ashfall created its own weather system. The particles in the air generated static electricity, causing lightning within the ash cloud. So while you're suffocating, there's also lightning happening at ground level. The air was hot, dry, and full of electrical discharge. It's like trying to breathe inside a clothes dryer full of glass while someone shoots tasers at you. Some people tried to escape the ash by going underground, into cellars, sewers, underground storage areas. This was a bad idea. Volcanic gases are often heavier than air and accumulate in low-lying areas. Carbon dioxide, hydrogen sulfide, and other toxic gases pooled in these spaces. People who went underground to escape the ash died from gas poisoning instead. It's like choosing between death flavours at the world's worst ice cream shop. Beyond the big three, incineration, crushing, and suffocation, there were dozens of other creative ways Vesuvius found to kill you. The volcano was apparently going for a high score in the variety of death category. Some of these are so bizarre that archaeologists initially didn't believe them until the evidence became undeniable. Trampling was surprisingly common. When thousands of people try to flee through narrow streets simultaneously, some of them are going to end up as ancient Roman pavement pizza. The gates of Pompeii became death funnels. Bodies piled up at the exits as people pushed, shoved, and climbed over each other. Some skeletons show injuries consistent with being stepped on repeatedly. You survived the volcano but died from crowdsurfing gone wrong. Then there were the boat disasters. Herculaneum was a seaside town, so naturally people tried to escape by sea. Except the pyroclastic flows didn't stop at the waterline. They travelled across the water's surface, superheating it and creating massive steam explosions. Boats were incinerated while still in the harbour. Some people made it to the boats but died in the boathouses waiting to launch. Others got far enough out to think they were safe, only to be boiled alive when the water temperature suddenly spiked. The sea offered no escape, only a different cooking method. Falling debris was another underappreciated killer. It wasn't just pumice falling from the sky. The earthquakes that preceded and accompanied the eruption knocked things loose. Statues toppled, columns collapsed. That nice marble sculpture of the emperor that you walked past every day. It's now a very regal murder weapon. One skeleton was found with a massive stone block where its head should be. The person was fleeing, probably thought they'd made it to safety, then got squashed by architecture. It's like a Looney Tunes death, but without the comedy. Some people died from what can only be described as poor decision-making under stress. There are bodies found in positions suggesting they went back for valuables. One person apparently died trying to lead a donkey loaded with possessions. The donkey, being smarter than its owner, had refused to move. They both died in place, the ultimate "I told you so" from an animal that couldn't talk. Dehydration killed some who survived the initial eruption. The ash in the air made water sources undrinkable. Wells were contaminated. The aqueducts were damaged. Even if you found shelter from the ash and heat, you still needed water. Some bodies show signs of severe dehydration, sunken eyes, contracted posture. They survived the dramatic deaths only to die from something as mundane as thirst. There were drownings too, which seems impossible during a volcanic eruption, until you realise that the earthquakes cause tsunamis. The Bay of Naples experienced several tsunami waves. People who fled to the beaches thinking they'd escaped the mountain got hit by walls of water instead. It's like the volcano called in backup from the ocean. "Hey, I missed some people, can you get them for me?" "Sure thing, buddy." Lightning strikes from the volcanic storms killed some people. Volcanic lightning is caused by the friction of ash particles creating massive static charges. It's more powerful and more frequent than regular lightning. Bodies have been found with patterns suggesting electrical burns. You're running from lava and ash only to get smited by Zeus having a collaboration with Vulcan. Starvation was a slower killer for those who were trapped but not immediately dead. Some people were sealed in rooms by ash and debris. They survived the heat and the gases but couldn't escape. They died over days or weeks, probably resorting to things we don't want to think about. Archaeologists have found evidence of attempted cannibalism in some sealed buildings. Desperate times, desperate measures, desperate ends. Heart attacks and strokes from the stress killed others. The human body isn't designed for that level of sustained terror. Some bodies show no signs of injury, burns, or suffocation. They just died from their bodies saying, "Nope, too much," and shutting down. It's perhaps the most relatable death. Your heart literally couldn't handle the situation. The weirdest deaths were the combination deaths. One person appears to have been simultaneously burned, crushed, and suffocated. It's like the volcano couldn't decide how to kill them, so it chose all of the above. Another skeleton shows signs of surviving the initial eruption with a broken leg, trying to escape on crutches, then getting hit by the pyroclastic flow. The volcano had no chill when it came to the injured. Let's do some math that would have depressed the hell out of you if you'd known it. The pyroclastic flows from Vesuvius travelled at speeds between 100 and 180 miles per hour, depending on the slope and density. The average human running speed is about 8 miles per hour. Elite sprinters can hit maybe 28 millimasses for short bursts. Even if you were Usain Bolt's ancient Roman ancestor blessed by Mercury himself, you're still moving 5 times slower than your death. It's like trying to outrun a Formula One car on foot while wearing sandals. The flows could travel up to 20 miles from the volcano. Pompeii was 6 miles away. At 100 Meistermeter, death reached you in 3.6 minutes. If you started running the instant the flow began, which you didn't because you couldn't see it coming until it was too late, you'd make it maybe 0.4 miles before becoming a historical footnote. The math isn't just against you, it's laughing at you while calculating your doom to 3 decimal places. But wait, it gets worse! The pyroclastic flow doesn't travel in a straight line like a polite disaster. It follows topography, speeding up on steep slopes, spreading out in valleys, jumping over ridges. It can climb hills and flow upstream against rivers. It's basically parkour for superheated death clouds. While you're trying to figure out which direction to run, the flow is coming at you from multiple angles, like a volcanic pincer movement. The warning time was essentially 0. The collapse of the eruption column that created the flows happened without warning. One moment the column is shooting straight up, the next it's collapsing and racing toward you. Modern volcanologists with all their equipment sometimes can't predict column collapse. You, with your Bronze Age understanding of mountains that explode, had no chance. It's like trying to predict when your computer will crash, except the blue screen of death is literal death. Even if you had supernatural speed, the area of effect was too large. The flows spread out in a roughly circular pattern from the volcano, covering hundreds of square miles. To escape, you'd need to outrun the flow's maximum range, which meant running 20 plus miles faster than 100 mph. Unless you had a time machine or a very fast horse that was somehow immune to volcanic death, you were geometrically doomed. The density of the flow made air resistance a factor you couldn't overcome. The cloud was full of particles, making it hundreds of times denser than regular air. Running through it would be like trying to sprint through soup. Hot soup full of glass. That's also moving at you at 100 mph. Your body would experience massive drag, slowing you down even more while the flow maintained its speed. Physics was actively conspiring against your survival. The temperature gradient extended beyond the visible flow. The heat preceded the flow by several hundred meters, raising air temperature to lethal levels before the main surge arrived. So even if you could somehow outrun the visible cloud, you'd run into an invisible wall of superheated air that would cook your lungs with your first breath. It's like the flow sent an advance team to murder you before the main force arrived. Let's talk about obstacles. Pompeii wasn't a flat-running track. It had walls, buildings, narrow streets, stairs, fountains, market stalls, and other humans all trying to flee. Your actual running speed through the city would be maybe 3 speedol if you were lucky. Meanwhile, the flow is treating buildings like speed bumps, flowing over and around them without slowing down. You're playing ancient parkour while death is playing no-clip mode. The psychological factor made it even worse. Humans don't run efficiently when terrified. Your breathing becomes irregular, reducing oxygen intake. Your muscles tense up, reducing flexibility. Your vision tunnels, making you more likely to trip. Fear makes you stupid, and stupid makes you slow. The flow, being an inanimate cloud of death, suffered no such psychological impediments. It maintained optimal performance while you degraded into panic meat. Even if you'd started running before the eruption, say you had a prophetic dream and started jogging toward Rome at dawn, you still would have needed to maintain a steady pace for hours to get outside the danger zone. Ancient Romans weren't marathon runners. Your cardio was probably terrible. Your sandals weren't designed for long-distance running. You'd likely collapse from exhaustion before getting to safety, then die tired instead of well-rested. The multiple surges meant that even if you somehow survived the first one, you'd just die from the second, or third, or fourth. Vesuvius sent at least 6 major pyroclastic surges over 2 days. It's like the volcano was save-scumming to make sure it got everyone. Each surge was potentially lethal, and they came at irregular intervals. You couldn't time your escape between them because you didn't know when the next one would arrive. The heat transfer from the pyroclastic flow to your body followed specific thermodynamic principles that would have fascinated you if they weren't actively killing you. The flow transferred heat through 3 mechanisms: conduction, direct contact, convection, moving fluid, and radiation, infrared energy. You were getting triple-teamed by the fundamental forces of heat transfer. It's like being attacked by the entire physics textbook chapter on thermodynamics. The Stefan Boltzmann law governed the radiative heat transfer. The amount of heat radiated is proportional to the 4th power of temperature. At 600 degrees, the flow was radiating about 20,000 watts per square meter. For comparison, a typical space heater puts out about 1,500 watts. You were being hit with the equivalent of 13 space heaters per square meter of skin, except the space heaters were also flying at you at 100 mmSm and made of poison. Your body's specific heat capacity is about 3.5 kJK. That means it takes 3.5 kilojoules of energy to raise 1 kilogram of your body by 1 degree Kelvin. The average Roman weighed maybe 65 kilo. To raise your body temperature from 37 degree to 100 degree boiling required about 14.3 megajoules of energy. The pyroclastic flow delivered that energy in less than a second. You went from normal to overboiled faster than a microwave burrito. The Fourier's law of heat conduction determined how quickly heat penetrated your tissues. Your skin has a thermal conductivity of about 0.2 mK. That's actually pretty low. You're a terrible heat conductor normally. But at the temperature differentials involved, 100 K of difference between the flow and your body, even poor conductors become highways for heat. Your skin barrier was about as effective as tissue paper against a flamethrower. The Biot number, which compares internal thermal resistance to surface thermal resistance, explains why you died so uniformly quickly. Your Biot number in the pyroclastic flow was much less than 0.1, meaning you heated up pretty much uniformly throughout your body rather than just on the surface. You weren't cooked from the outside in like a roast. You were more like food in a microwave, heating everywhere simultaneously. The latent heat of vaporization for water is 2,257 kJ. Your body is about 60% water, so roughly 39 kg of water needed to be vaporized. That required about 88 megajoules of energy. The flow had energy to spare. It could have vaporized you several times over. The volcano was using massive overkill, like using a nuclear bomb to swat a fly, except you're the fly, and the nuclear bomb is made of hot gas and moving at highway speeds. Heat shock proteins in your cells would have activated in the milliseconds before cell death, trying desperately to protect cellular machinery from thermal damage. These proteins normally help cells survive temperature stress. Against 600 degrees, they were about as useful as an umbrella in a tsunami. Your cell's last act was a futile attempt at damage control that was immediately overwhelmed by physics. The thermal expansion of different tissues happened at different rates, creating internal mechanical stress. Your bones expanded slower than your soft tissues. Your brain expanded faster than your skull. Metal dental fillings, if Romans had those, which they didn't, would have expanded differently than teeth. You were literally being torn apart at the molecular level by differential expansion. It's like your body parts were in a race to see which could thermally expand fastest, and everyone lost. The phase transitions in your body happened in a specific order. First, the water in your cells hit 100 degrees and turned to steam. Then proteins denatured at around 105 D, fats rendered at about 120 D, collagen contracted at 65 D, which is why bodies are found in the pugilistic pose. Each tissue had its own thermal death point, and the flow exceeded all of them simultaneously. You were experiencing every possible type of thermal death at once. The adiabatic process meant the flow retained heat efficiently as it travelled. As the gas expanded moving down the mountain, it should have cooled. But the adiabatic process meant the flow retained heat efficiently as it travelled. As the gas expanded moving down the mountain, it should have cooled. But the particles in the flow created internal friction, converting kinetic energy back to heat. The flow was essentially self-heating through particle collisions. It's like the world's worst perpetual motion machine, except instead of creating free energy, it's creating free death, and delivering it directly to your location at no extra charge. The ground beneath Pompeii was basically a geological conspiracy to maximize your death. The Bay of Naples sits on a complex system of faults and fractures that made Vesuvius possible in the first place. The African tectonic plate is sliding under the Eurasian plate at about 2 inches per year, which sounds slow until you realise it's been doing this for millions of years, building up pressure like the world's slowest but most inevitable time bomb. The magma chamber under Vesuvius was roughly 400 cubic kilometres of liquid rock mixed with dissolved gases. That's about 160,000 Olympic swimming pools of molten death, waiting for an excuse to visit the surface. The pressure in the chamber was around 2,000 bars. That's like having 2,000 atmospheres sitting on top of your magma. When that pressure found a weakness, it didn't knock politely. It kicked the door down, burned the house, and salted the earth. The type of magma matters for how you died. Vesuvius produced phonotephyrite lava, which is intermediate in composition. It's more explosive than basalt, the gentle lava of Hawaii, but less explosive than rhyolite, the world-ending stuff of Yellowstone. You got the Goldilocks of volcanic death. Not too gentle, not too extreme, just right for preserving your corpse for future tourism. The eruption followed what geologists call the Plinian sequence, named after Pliny, who died studying it, which is like naming a disease after its first victim. First comes the gas thrust phase, where volatile gases shoot the eruption column skyward. Then the convective thrust phase, where the hot material rises by buoyancy. Finally, the column collapse phase, where gravity wins and everything races back down as pyroclastic flows. You experienced all 3 phases, though only the last one personally. The stratigraphy of the deposits tells the timeline of your doom. Each layer represents a different phase of the eruption. The white pumice from the early afternoon, the grey pumice from the evening, the pyroclastic surge deposits from the night and early morning. Your body is probably in layer S4 or S5, depending on when exactly you gave up on the whole being alive thing. You're part of the geological record now, a data point in the Earth's violent history. The mineralogy of the ash that killed you was specifically heinous. It contained plagioclase, leucite, clinopyroxene, and volcanic glass. Each mineral had different melting points, different densities, different ways of destroying your lungs. The volcanic glass was particularly nasty, sharp, angular fragments that turned breathing into internal knife juggling. The minerals also affected preservation. The calcium from plagioclase helped fossilize bones. The silica from the glass created the conditions for those perfect body casts. Underground, the geology was setting you up for failure long before the eruption. The limestone bedrock under Pompeii is fractured and faulted. These fractures channeled volcanic gases, creating zones of death even in areas the pyroclastic flows didn't directly hit. Carbon dioxide, being denser than air, flowed through these underground channels and pooled in basements. Some people who thought they were safe underground died from gas that travelled through solid rock to get them. The regional geology created a perfect amphitheatre for death. The mountains around the Bay of Naples focused and channeled the pyroclastic flows. Valleys became death funnels. Ridges created jump points where flows could leap gaps and surprise people who thought topography would save them. The entire landscape was optimised for maximum lethality, like a geological murder weapon designed by committee. The interaction between the volcanic material and the local geology created unique killing conditions. When the hot pyroclastic material hit the limestone buildings, it caused thermal decomposition, releasing more carbon dioxide. The seawater in the Bay of Naples flashed to steam, creating secondary explosions. The sandy soil liquefied in places, creating quicksand that trapped people trying to flee. Every aspect of the local geology found a way to contribute to your death. Even today, the geology is still trying to kill people. Vesuvius is very much active with a magma chamber that's slowly refilling. The last eruption was in 1944, which in geological time is basically yesterday. 3 million people now live in the red zone around the volcano. When, not if, Vesuvius erupts again, it'll be Pompeii 2, electric boogaloo, except with more people and better special effects. You might have thought the sea was your salvation. Pompeii was a port city, boats were everywhere and water doesn't burn. Perfect escape route, right? Wrong. Dead wrong. Literally dead wrong. The Bay of Naples became a death trap that would make Poseidon himself say, "That's excessive." The first problem was everyone had the same idea. The harbour was like Black Friday at Walmart, except instead of fighting over discounted TVs, people were fighting over anything that could float. Fishing boats, merchant vessels, fancy pleasure barges, makeshift rafts made of doors tied together with hope and desperation. If it had even theoretical buoyancy, someone was trying to claim it. The social hierarchy dissolved instantly at the docks. That rich merchant who usually travelled in a personal galley with silk cushions, he's now wrestling a fisherman for control of a leaky rowboat. That senator's wife, who wouldn't normally acknowledge your existence, she's offering you her jewellery collection for a spot on your cousin's fishing vessel. The slave who spent years rowing for his master, he just pushed his master into the water and took off with the boat. Maritime law became, whoever's actually in the boat makes the rules. But here's where Vesuvius pulled a pro-gamer move. The pyroclastic flows didn't stop at the waterline. These flows were partially made of superheated gas, which is less dense than water. So they skimmed across the sea's surface like the world's deadliest jet ski. People who made it onto boats, who managed to push off from the dock, who thought they were rowing to safety, they got cooked on the water like seafood in the world's largest boiling pot. The heat from the flows turned the surface of the bay into a steam explosion factory. Water flashing to vapour creates a volume expansion of 1/600 times. The sea literally exploded upward in massive steam geysers. Boats were lifted and flipped like toys in a bathtub when a toddler discovers cause and effect. One moment you're rowing for your life, the next you're airborne, then you're underwater, then you're dead. The sea gave you more ways to die, not fewer. Those who made it far enough from shore to avoid the direct flows faced another problem: the ash fall. Volcanic ash and boats don't mix well. The ash accumulated on sails, making them too heavy to function. It mixed with seawater to create a caustic slurry that ate through rope and wood. It clogged the respiratory systems of rowers, who couldn't row if they couldn't breathe. Boats started sinking not from damage, but from the sheer weight of accumulated ash. You escaped the land only to have the sky sink you. The earthquakes that accompanied the eruption created tsunamis. Not huge ones, but enough to make an already terrible situation worse. These weren't the gentle waves you see at the beach. These were walls of water carrying volcanic debris, dead fish, and probably dead people. Getting hit by a tsunami full of pumice is like being punched by the ocean wearing a knuckle duster made of volcanic rock. Archaeological evidence from Herculaneum's boathouses tells the whole story. Hundreds of skeletons were found huddled in these structures, waiting for boats that never launched. Men, women, children, rich, poor, all equally dead. Some were found with their possessions, money pouches, jewellery, the stuff they thought mattered. One skeleton was found holding a baby. Another was embracing what was probably their dog. They died waiting for salvation that the sea couldn't provide. The boats that did make it out faced navigation problems. The ash cloud turned day to night. You couldn't see the coastline, couldn't see other boats, couldn't even see the stars to navigate. Some boats probably collided in the darkness. Others ran aground trying to follow the coast. Still others just drifted, their crews dead or dying from ash inhalation, floating tombs that would eventually wash up on distant shores as mysterious ghost ships. The psychological horror of the failed sea escape was extreme. Imagine making it to a boat, pushing off from shore, thinking you've saved your family. You row until your hands bleed. Then you look back and see the glowing cloud racing across the water toward you. There's nowhere to go. You can't row faster than 100 mep. You can't dive underwater because you need to breathe. You just have to watch death approach across the waves you thought would save you. Some people jumped off boats and tried to swim underwater to escape the heat. This didn't work. The pyroclastic flow heated the water's surface layer to lethal temperatures. Even if you could hold your breath long enough when you surfaced, you'd breathe superheated steam that would destroy your lungs instantly. The sea offered the illusion of escape, but it was just another venue for the Volcano's murder show. Maybe you were smarter than the boat people. Maybe you thought, heat rises, so I'll go down. Pompeii had extensive underground areas, cellars, cisterns, sewage tunnels, storage areas carved into the soft volcanic tuff. Surely going underground would protect you from the falling pumice and flowing heat. This logic would make perfect sense if physics wasn't actively trying to kill you. The first people to go underground probably felt pretty smart. While everyone else was running around screaming, they calmly descended into cool, quiet cellars. The pumice fall couldn't reach them. The heat seemed less intense. They had water from cisterns, food from storage, maybe even wine to make the apocalypse more bearable. For a few hours, they were the winners of the survival lottery. Then the pyroclastic flows arrived, and being underground became the worst possible choice. Remember those gases in the flow that were denser than air? They flowed downward, seeking the lowest points. Every cellar, every tunnel, every underground space became a collection point for carbon dioxide, hydrogen sulfide, and other unbreathable gases. The underground became gas chambers, except instead of being designed for execution, they were accidental death traps that you voluntarily entered. The gases displaced oxygen silently, invisibly. Carbon dioxide is colourless and odourless at these concentrations. The first sign of trouble would be feeling drowsy, then confused, then unconscious, then dead. Entire families were found in cellars, positioned like they just fell asleep. No signs of struggle, no defensive positions, just peaceful-looking death. They never knew what hit them because what hit them was the absence of something. Oxygen. But wait, it gets worse. The pyroclastic flows didn't just send gases underground, they sent heat too. The flows infiltrated every opening, doorways, windows, ventilation shafts. The superheated gases flowed through these openings and accumulated in underground spaces. Cellars became ovens. The stone walls, which normally kept things cool, now trapped the heat. You basically climbed into a pizza oven and closed the door behind yourself. Some underground spaces had partial collapses from the earthquakes, trapping people before the flows even arrived. They survived the initial eruption only to be buried alive. Archaeological evidence shows scratch marks where people tried to claw through solid rock. Some bodies were found in positions suggesting they lived for days underground, slowly dying of dehydration in the dark. The volcano gave you time to think about your poor life choices. The wealthy had elaborate underground complexes, multi-room cellars with decorated walls, storage for valuable goods, even underground tricliniums for cool summer dining. These became elaborate tombs. The more extensive your underground complex, the more ways you had to die. Multiple rooms meant multiple places for gases to accumulate. Decorated walls meant more surface area to radiate heat. Those valuable goods you stored, they became the grave goods you'd be buried with. The sewage tunnels seemed like a good escape route until you realised they connected to the sea. When the pyroclastic flows hit the water and created steam explosions, that steam had to go somewhere. It went up the sewage tunnels like a superheated enema for the entire city. People fleeing through these tunnels were flash-steamed from below. It's like the volcano discovered the city's plumbing and decided to weaponize it. Water cisterns became death traps in a different way. The heat from the pyroclastic flows boiled the water in the cisterns. Anyone hiding near them was cooked by steam. The cisterns also cracked from thermal shock, flooding underground areas with boiling water. You went underground to avoid being burned and ended up being boiled instead. The volcano appreciated variety in its killing methods. Religious underground spaces, mithraeums, early Christian meeting places, mystery cult chambers became particularly poignant death scenes. People fled to these sacred spaces thinking their gods would protect them. They didn't. Bodies were found in prayer positions, holding religious objects clustered around altars. Faith provided comfort but not survival. The pyroclastic flows were aggressively secular in their killing. One particularly horrific find was a bakery cellar where the workers had taken shelter. They were found with bread dough that had been prepared for baking. The dough had actually baked from the heat that penetrated the cellar, creating bread that was simultaneously a testament to normal life and evidence of abnormal death. The bread survived better than the bakers. Perhaps the most tragically optimistic were those who decided to stay put and wait for the eruption to end. After all, they'd survived earthquakes before. How different could this be? These people barricaded themselves in their homes, thinking solid walls and a good roof would protect them. They became archaeology's most well-preserved examples of fatal optimism. The logic wasn't entirely stupid. Pompeii had experienced earthquakes, floods, and other disasters. The standard response was to hunker down, wait for it to pass, then rebuild. This had worked for generations. The problem was that volcanic eruptions don't follow the same rules as other natural disasters. It's like preparing for a flood and getting hit by a meteor instead. The first few hours probably reinforced their decision. While people outside were panicking and getting pelted with pumice, those inside were relatively comfortable. Sure, pumice was hitting the roof like hail, but the roof was holding. The walls blocked the worst of the ash. They had food, water, and most importantly, they weren't out there in the chaos. They probably felt pretty smart. Then the weight started accumulating. Roman roofs weren't designed for loads beyond rain and occasional snow. 6 feet of pumice weighs about 100 pounds per square foot. The beams started creaking. Dust began falling from the ceiling. The smart ones left at this point. The stubborn ones reinforced their roofs with support beams and kept waiting. They reinforced their tomb while sitting in it. When the pyroclastic flows arrived, houses became crematoriums. The flows didn't need to break down doors. They flowed through every tiny opening. Under doors, through shutters, down chimneys. The superheated gas filled rooms in seconds. People who had carefully barricaded themselves in had also carefully sealed themselves into death chambers. The walls that protected them from pumice trapped them with superheated gas. Archaeological evidence shows families died together in their homes, often in touching scenes of attempted protection. Parents covering children, couples embracing, pets with their owners. These tableaus of familial love are heartbreaking until you remember they're also tableaus of familial death. The volcano didn't care about your family bonds. It killed you together, which is either sweet or horrific depending on your perspective. Some houses show evidence of attempts to adapt to the ongoing eruption. Pumice cleared from courtyards, temporary supports erected, cloths over windows to block ash. These people were actively trying to survive, making rational adaptations to irrational circumstances. They were playing defense against a volcano, which is like trying to win a chess game where your opponent can flip the board and set it on fire. The wealthy had better houses but died just as dead. Their multiple rooms just gave them more places to be wrong about survival. Their decorated walls and beautiful frescoes watched them die. Their private bathhouses became death pools. Their gardens, carefully cultivated with exotic plants, became ash repositories. Wealth bought better architecture but not better outcomes. Some waited it out in their shops, probably worried about looters or just attached to their livelihoods. Bakers died by their ovens. Fullers died in their workshops. Merchants died protecting inventory that no one would ever buy. One jeweler was found with a bag of his most valuable pieces. He saved his wealth and lost his life, which is the worst possible exchange rate. The progression of hope to horror can be traced through the archaeological layers. Early deposits show organised responses. Pumice swept into corners, possessions moved to protected areas. Later deposits show chaos, scattered belongings, collapsed supports, bodies in positions of flight that never made it to the door. You can literally see the moment when waiting it out became too late to run. The really tragic ones were those who almost made it. Bodies found reaching for doors, hands on latches, 1 foot over the threshold. They waited too long, realised their mistake, and died in the act of changing their minds. The volcano's timing was impeccable in its cruelty. Here's something historians don't emphasise enough. Some people actually survived. Not in Pompeii itself, but in the surrounding areas. They were far enough away to avoid instant death, but close enough to watch their entire world get deleted. These survivors didn't get a happy ending. They got PTSD before psychology was invented, to name it. Imagine being a farmer 5 miles from Pompeii. You survive the eruption, but your fields are buried under feet of ash. Your livestock are dead. The river is clogged with volcanic debris. The soil that was fertile is now basically concrete. You're alive, but economically dead. Everything you built over a lifetime is gone, and unlike modern disasters, there's no insurance, no FEMA, no disaster relief, except what the Emperor feels like sending. The immediate aftermath was chaos. Roads were impassable. The ash was still hot days after the eruption. It rained, turning the ash into cement-like mud that hardened around anything it touched. Survivors trying to return to find family or salvage possessions found a landscape that looked like the moon if the moon was trying to kill you. Which, now that you think about it, is probably what the moon is actually like. Disease followed the eruption like a morbid +1. Dead bodies, animal and human, rotted under the ash. Water sources were contaminated. Respiratory infections from ash inhalation ran rampant. Survivors who escaped the immediate eruption died weeks later from what Romans called the coughing sickness, but was probably silicosis from volcanic ash exposure. The volcano kept killing even after it stopped erupting. The psychological trauma was unprecedented. Survivors described symptoms that modern psychiatrists would recognise as severe PTSD, inability to sleep, constant anxiety, flashbacks triggered by smoke or loud sounds. Some survivors reportedly never spoke again. Others became obsessed with religious purification rituals. Still others just walked into the wilderness and disappeared. The volcano broke minds as efficiently as it broke bodies. The economic refugees had nowhere to go. Imagine 100,000 people suddenly homeless, jobless and traumatized, flooding into neighbouring cities that didn't want them. These weren't welcome guests. They were reminders that the gods could destroy everything at any moment. They were walking bad omens. Many cities closed their gates to survivors. Sorry your city got destroyed, but that sounds like a you problem. Families were shattered, not just by death, but by separation during the chaos. Children lost in the evacuation. Spouses who fled in different directions. Parents who sent children ahead and never followed. The Roman record-keeping system, which relied on local documentation, was buried under ash. People couldn't prove their identities, their citizenship, their property ownership. You could claim to be anyone, but proving it was impossible when the records were under 20 feet of volcanic concrete. Slaves had it particularly rough. If their masters died, were they free? If their master survived, but the documentation of ownership was destroyed, who did they belong to? Some took the opportunity to disappear and start new lives. Others were re-enslaved by whoever could claim them. The legal chaos lasted for years. Courts were clogged with property disputes that couldn't be resolved because the evidence was in the Vesuvian exclusion zone. The trauma was intergenerational. Children who survived grew up with what Romans called mountain fear, a terror of any elevated landscape. They refused to live near hills, much less mountains. Some moved to the flattest parts of the empire, as far from volcanic activity as possible. Their children inherited this fear, creating generations of geographic trauma that shaped settlement patterns. Emperor Titus tried to help, which in Roman terms meant throwing money at the problem and hoping it went away. He appointed 2 ex-consuls to coordinate relief efforts. They redistributed property from those who died without heirs. But Roman disaster relief was basically thoughts, prayers, and maybe some grain if you were lucky. It wasn't nearly enough for the scale of devastation. The religious crisis was real. If the gods let this happen, were they angry, powerless, absent? The eruption triggered a theological crisis that rippled through Roman religion. Some cults gained followers by claiming they predicted it. Others lost followers because their gods didn't prevent it. Christianity, still a minor sect, gained converts by claiming it was divine judgment on pagan Rome. The volcano inadvertently became a recruiting tool for a religion that wouldn't be official for another 300 years. Within days of the eruption, while the ash was still warm and bodies were still cooling, the looters arrived. These weren't desperate survivors looking for food. These were professional grave robbers who saw opportunity in catastrophe. They brought tools, maps, and absolutely no shame. The ancient equivalent of disaster capitalists, except instead of buying destroyed property cheap, they just stole everything that wasn't nailed down, and some things that were. The looters developed techniques that archaeologists would later accidentally recreate. They dug narrow tunnels following walls, knowing that's where valuables were often stored. They learned to identify body cavities in the ash. Where there were bodies, there were often purses, jewellery, portable wealth. They became expert at reading destruction, finding pockets where heat and ash hadn't completely destroyed organic materials. Some looters were incredibly bold, tunnelling into houses while the ash was still hot enough to cause burns. They wrapped their feet in wet leather, covered their faces with vinegar-soaked cloths, and worked in shifts to avoid heat exhaustion. They were like ancient volcanic miners, except instead of extracting ore, they were extracting dead people's stuff. The Roman government eventually tried to stop the looting, not out of respect for the dead, but because they wanted the valuable stuff for themselves. They posted guards around the destroyed cities. The guards immediately became part of the problem, taking bribes from looters or doing their own excavating. It was corruption all the way down, with everyone trying to profit from mass death. Some looters left graffiti marking where they'd already searched. House tunnelled, already emptied, nothing left worth taking. It's weirdly considerate, like professional courtesy among grave robbers. These inscriptions survived and confused early archaeologists who thought they were ancient warnings or religious markings. Nope, just thieves leaving notes for other thieves. The really successful looters were those who knew the city before the eruption, former residents who knew which houses belonged to wealthy merchants, where the temple treasuries were, which shops had silver rather than bronze. They had mental maps of wealth that they could navigate even through the destruction. Insider trading, but for grave robbing. The looters missed a lot, though. They were looking for gold and silver, not preserved food or carbonized scrolls. They walked past priceless frescoes to steal a few coins. They ignored preserved furniture to grab a bronze lamp. Their narrow focus on portable wealth meant they left behind artifacts that modern archaeologists consider invaluable. Thank God for greedy people with no appreciation for art history. Some looters died in the tunnels. Cave-ins were common. Pockets of toxic gas still lingered. Some tunnels led to dead ends or into cisterns full of now toxic water. Bodies of looters have been found, distinguishable from eruption victims by their position in the archaeological layers. They died after the eruption, killed by their own greed. The volcano got a few posthumous kills. The systematic looting actually helped preserve some areas. Looters would break through roofs to enter buildings, creating holes that rainwater could enter. This water mixed with ash to create a cement-like seal that preserved lower levels. Their destruction inadvertently created better preservation. It's like they were accidentally helpful while being morally horrible. Eventually the easily accessible loot ran out. The tunnels became too dangerous. The guards became too expensive to bribe. The looters moved on to other disasters, other opportunities. But they'd already taken enormous amounts of portable wealth. Statues, jewellery, coins, metalwork. all disappeared into the black market of the ancient world. Your death funded someone else's retirement. After the humans, living and looting, were done with Pompeii, nature moved in. The ash that killed everything also created incredibly fertile soil once it weathered. Within years, the area was covered in aggressive pioneer plants. Within decades, it was unrecognizable as a city. Mother Nature was playing an extreme version of urban renewal. The first plants to return were the weird ones. Nitrogen-fixing legumes that could handle the harsh, nutrient-poor early soil. Ferns that actually liked the acidic conditions. Mosses that could break down volcanic glass. It was like a botanical freak show, with only the weirdest, toughest plants surviving. These pioneers slowly broke down the ash, creating soil that slightly less weird plants could use. Animals came back faster than anyone expected. Lizards love volcanic rock. It heats up in the sun, creating perfect basking spots. Birds found the ruins perfect for nesting, protected from predators, full of convenient hiding spots. Bats colonized the underground areas that weren't full of toxic gas. Pompeii became a post-apocalyptic nature preserve. The really creepy part was how normal everything looked, from a distance within just 20 years. Green hills where a city used to be. Trees growing through what used to be houses. If you didn't know there was a city there, you'd never guess. It was like the earth was trying to hide the evidence, covering up the mass murder with a green blanket. Vines were particularly aggressive. They grew through windows, over walls, around columns. They broke apart structures with their roots while seeming to embrace them with their stems. It was destruction disguised as affection. The vines particularly loved the lead pipes, which they could crack and invade, following the water system throughout the buried city. Some plants grew nowhere else but on the buried cities. Botanists would later identify species that only existed on Vesuvian deposits. These plants had evolved specifically to live on volcanic ash, creating a unique ecosystem on top of mass death. It's like the plants were memorializing the disaster in their DNA. The soil became incredibly productive. The weathered volcanic ash was full of minerals that plants loved. Farmers slowly moved back, not knowing they were farming on top of a buried city. They grew grapes for wine, which seems inappropriately festive. They grew vegetables that pulled nutrients from soil enriched by decomposed bodies. The food chain got really dark really fast. Trees grew in patterns that reflected the buried structures below. Lines of trees following buried roads, gaps where courtyards were, denser growth over areas where bodies had decomposed, adding extra nutrients to the soil. The vegetation was creating a ghost map of the city below, visible only from above and only if you knew what to look for. Wildlife thrived in the absence of humans. Deer grazed where the forum used to be. Wolves denned in partially collapsed buildings. Wild boar rooted through the ash layers, occasionally unearthing artifacts that they ignored in favour of tubers. The animals were living their best lives on humanity's worst day. The weird thing was how quickly people forgot. Within a generation, locals weren't sure exactly where Pompeii had been. Somewhere around here was as specific as it got. Maps were vague, memories were vaguer. The city that had been home to 20,000 people became a legend, then a story, then a vague reference to that place that got destroyed that one time. Congratulations, your agonizing death is now a major tourist attraction. About 2.5 million people visit your corpse annually, taking selfies with your plaster cast like you're a celebrity who's really committed to holding still for photos. You've achieved a kind of immortality. It's just the kind where people eat gelato while staring at your preserved death pose. The tourism started almost immediately after excavation. 18th century aristocrats on their grand tours would visit Pompeii for the thrill of seeing real dead bodies. They'd have picnics in the ruins, literally eating lunch surrounded by evidence of mass death. They'd chip off pieces of frescoes as souvenirs. Your death scene became someone's conversation piece at dinner parties. Oh, this? Just a little something from Pompeii. Yes, that's probably human ash in the crevices. By the Victorian era, you'd become morally instructive. Tour guides would point to bodies in compromising positions as evidence of Roman decadence, conveniently ignoring that these poses were caused by muscle contraction, from extreme heat, not ancient orgies. You became a prop in morality tales about the dangers of luxury and sin. Your death by volcano was somehow your fault for living in a nice city with functioning sewers. Modern tourism has turned you into a commodity. You can buy keychains of your death pose, t-shirts with slogans like "I survived Pompeii," they didn't, snow globes with ash instead of snow, which is both clever and deeply disturbing. Your agonizing final moment has been merchandised into refrigerator magnets. Capitalism found a way to monetize your mortality. The guided tours are exercises in cognitive dissonance. Cheerful guides explain how you died while tourists take photos. And here we see a family who died embracing each other, probably from thermal shock. Don't forget to visit our gift shop. It's education wrapped in entertainment, wrapped in tragedy, wrapped in a 15 entrance fee. Virtual reality experiences now let people experience the eruption. For just $30, tourists can wear a headset and live through your death, complete with surround sound and haptic feedback. They experience a sanitized 10-minute version of your 24-hour ordeal, then rate it on TripAdvisor. 4 stars, very realistic, but the snack bar was overpriced. Hollywood keeps making movies about you, each one less accurate than the last. The 2014 film Pompeii turned your death into a backdrop for a gladiator love story. Kit Harington's abs got more screen time than historical accuracy. The Volcano became a supporting actor in a romance nobody asked for. Your actual death, terrifying, sudden, universal, doesn't make for good Hollywood. It needs more drama, more romance, more CGI lava that didn't actually exist. Video games let players survive Pompeii, which is ironic since nobody actually did. You can run from pyroclastic flows that move at convenient video game speeds. You can hide from volcanic bombs in buildings that magically don't collapse. You can save NPCs who are programmed to thank you before disappearing into digital ash. It's disaster tourism gamified with achievement points for witnessing mass death. Social media has made you viral in ways the volcano never could. Your plaster casts are Instagram famous. That dog has its own hashtag. People make TikToks doing dances in front of your preserved corpses. You're a meme. The floor is lava jokes with pictures of your actual death. This is fine memes with Pompeii burning in the background. Your tragedy has been reduced to shareable content. Educational documentaries try to be respectful, but still sensationalize. Pompeii, City of the Dead, in dramatic font over ominous music. They use CGI to recreate your death in high definition, showing your skin bubbling and your eyes boiling for educational purposes. They interview experts who explain exactly how you died, while dramatic reenactments show actors pretending to suffocate. It's knowledge as entertainment, education as spectacle. Your death has contributed more to science than your life ever could have. Volcanologists study you to understand pyroclastic flows. Archaeologists study you to understand Roman society. Anthropologists study you to understand ancient populations. Doctors study you to understand trauma. You're basically a multidisciplinary research project that happens to have been a person once. Your bones revealed ancient diseases, lead poisoning from the pipes, malaria from the mosquitoes, tuberculosis from the crowding. Your teeth showed what you ate. Too much grain, not enough vegetables, way too much garum on everything. Your healed fractures revealed ancient medical practices, mostly involving hope it sets right technology. You're a medical record written in calcium and catastrophe. DNA analysis revealed Pompeii was more diverse than historians thought. African DNA, Middle Eastern DNA, Northern European DNA, all dying together in democratic equality. The volcano didn't care about your ethnicity. It was an equal opportunity destroyer. Your genetics proved Rome was multicultural before multiculturalism was a word. Your preserved food taught us about Roman cuisine. That bread in the ovens showed baking techniques. The eggs in the taverns revealed protein sources. The dormice in jars, yes, Romans ate dormice, demonstrated dietary preferences we'd rather not think about. Every meal you never got to eat became data about ancient nutrition. The way you died informed modern disaster planning. Volcanologists studied the distribution of bodies to understand how pyroclastic flows behave. Emergency planners use Pompeii as a worst-case scenario for Naples, which sits in the same danger zone with 3 million people. Your death is literally saving future lives by showing exactly what not to do when a volcano explodes. Your preserved parasites, yes. Scientists study ancient poop, revealed disease patterns. Roundworm, whipworm, dysentery. You had it all. The latrines of Pompeii are treasure troves of information about ancient gut health. Scientists get excited about 2,000-year-old feces because it tells them about diet, disease, and daily life. Your bowel movements became scientific literature. The positions you died in helped establish forensic techniques. The pugilistic pose proved heat death. The defensive positions showed attempts at protection. The distribution patterns revealed crowd dynamics during disasters. Modern forensics uses techniques developed from studying your corpse to solve current crimes. You're contributing to murder investigations 2 millennia after being murdered by a mountain. Brain tissue from some victims, vitrified by extreme heat, is being studied with advanced imaging. Scientists can see neural structures in glass that used to be thoughts. Your final moment, your last thought, might be preserved in crystallized brain matter. It's poetry if poetry was written by thermodynamics and read through electron microscopes. Studies of your bones revealed social inequality. Rich people had better nutrition, fewer signs of hard labour, different disease patterns. Poor people showed stress markers from physical work, malnutrition, untreated injuries. Death was equal, but life wasn't, and your bones told that story. Economic inequality is literally written in your skeleton. Chemical analysis of your remains revealed migration patterns. Isotopes in your teeth showed where you grew up. Strontium levels indicated local versus foreign origins. You might have been a trader from Egypt, a slave from Gaul, a merchant from Syria. Your teeth are passports that customs never stamped. Here's the thing. Your death changed the world in ways you couldn't possibly imagine. Not just scientifically or culturally, but philosophically. The preservation of Pompeii created a time capsule that fundamentally altered how humanity thinks about the past, catastrophe, and mortality. Before Pompeii's excavation, ancient Rome was known through literature, ruins, and imagination. After Pompeii, it was real, viscerally, undeniably real. Your preserved city showed daily life in microscopic detail. Suddenly, ancient Romans weren't mythological figures or historical abstractions. They were people who wrote graffiti about their bowel movements and drew penises on walls. You humanized history by dying in it. The Enlightenment philosophers used Pompeii as evidence for their theories. Here was proof that civilizations could end suddenly, that progress wasn't guaranteed, that nature was indifferent to human achievement. Your catastrophe became a philosophical argument about the fragility of everything we build. You died to teach us about mortality. Your city changed how archaeology works. Before Pompeii, excavation was treasure hunting. After Pompeii, it became science. Archaeologists learned to read stratigraphy, to preserve context, to understand that the spaces between objects matter as much as the objects themselves. Every modern archaeological technique traces back to someone studying your ash-covered home. You're the reason we know how to dig carefully now. Climate scientists study you to understand volcanic impacts. You're part of climate models and eruption predictions. Your death is literally helping us prepare for future disasters. Every volcanologist who warns a city to evacuate is, in some way, using lessons learned from what happened to you. You're a data point that saves lives. Your preserved food, your bones, your parasites, your DNA, they've taught us more about ancient life than all the written records combined. You've contributed to medicine, nutrition, epidemiology, genetics, and archaeology. You're probably cited in more peer-reviewed papers than most people who lived long, healthy lives. You're more useful dead than most people are alive. Here's the ultimate irony. You wanted to be forgotten. You wanted to live, work, die, and have your name lost to time like billions of others. Instead, you got the opposite. Your name is gone, but your death is immortal. Your individual identity is erased, but your collective experience is preserved forever. You've become a mirror for humanity. We look at Pompeii and see ourselves, our mortality, our fragility, our tendency to build beautiful cities in dangerous places and hope nothing bad happens. We see our complacency. We see what we'd lose if we lost it all. You're a cautionary tale that actually happened. Not fiction or theory, but real people in real homes with real things they owned and loved, all gone in a day. Vesuvius didn't just kill you. It created you. It transformed you from a person into a symbol, a lesson, a data point, a tourist attraction, a meme, a scientific specimen, and a reminder. Your death was 24 hours of terror. Your afterlife has been nearly 2,000 years of impact. And here's what really haunts us about Pompeii. It could happen again. Mount Vesuvius still exists. Naples sits in its shadow with 3 million people. Somewhere right now, people are living in the danger zone thinking it won't happen to them just like you did. History doesn't repeat itself, but Vesuvius sure can. You wanted a normal life. You got eternal life instead. Not the kind any of you hoped for. Not heaven, not glory, not legacy through descendants. Just eternal presence. Forever studied, forever analysed, forever seen. Forever dead, but forever impossible to forget. The Pompeian paradox. To be destroyed is to be preserved. To lose everything is to become unforgettable. To die in an instant is to live for millennia. That's not a bad ending for a catastrophe. That's not redemption, but it's something. It's meaning carved out of meaningless death. It's purpose found in purposeless destruction. Your city is gone, but you remain. And as long as humans exist to study, to learn, to visit, and to wonder, you will remain. Pompey died on August 24, 79 AD, but Pompey never stopped living, and that, for what it's worth, is your legacy.